My husband used me for power, so I used my pain for revenge and exposed. He didn't just betray me, he strategically destroyed me. Not out of anger, but out of ambition. I was his golden ticket, the heir to everything, and he played the long game and married me. I'm Tracy, daughter of legacy, heart of my family's empire. And the woman whose own husband stabbed her in the back. The moment he tasted power, he didn't just betray our vows. He fired me from the very business my parents built from scratch. But what he didn't know is that I don't break, I rebuild. And when I rise, I make sure everyone sees the truth. Let me know where you're watching from. And subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against people you trusted most. Blake wasn't just my cousin, he was my childhood friend. We shared everything, toys, classrooms, dreams, and secrets, whispered under starry skies. The one who said I was his favorite girl in the world. I was just 17 when everything changed. I still remember the phone call that shattered my world. The static, the pause, the voice that didn't know how to say it right. My parents were gone. A plane crash. No survivors. Just like that, the heartbeat of my world stopped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry right away. I just stood still, feeling the earth tilt beneath me and knowing, somehow, that nothing would ever be the same again. My uncle, my father's brother, stepped in with calm authority. He said all the right things. You're not alone, sweetheart. We're your family. We'll take care of you now. His wife, my aunt, pulled me into her arms, her perfume sweet but suffocating, whispering, "You're safe with us, Tracy. You'll always be safe." And I believed them, Blake, with his quiet voice and gentle touch. Blake, who said, "You're not alone. I've got you." He held my hand at the funeral, kissed my forehead when I cried. We weren't just cousins anymore. At 21, I stood in a white dress beside Blake, the boy who once held my hand at my parents' funeral, now slipping a ring onto my trembling finger. I should have felt joy, but a quiet ache pressed behind my smile, the ache of vows spoken without my mother to fix my veil, or my father to walk me down the aisle. I told myself this was love, that Blake was my home now, but deep inside, something hollow echoed. I was marrying the only person left who remembered me before the world shattered, and I mistook that memory for safety. I used to believe love was my shield, that family meant protection, but life taught me otherwise. After I married Blake, I thought I was stepping into forever. My heart was still healing from my parents' death, and marrying the boy I loved since I was 17 felt like holding on to something real in a world that had fallen apart. He wasn't just my husband, he was my lifeline, my comfort, my history, my future. At least I believe so. What I didn't know was that while I was mourning, they were planning. Uncle Edward, who took my custody after the crash, became the legal guardian not just of me, but of everything my parents left behind. The company, the legacy, the shares, the wealth. And slowly, silently, he became the spider in the center of a golden web. He wore kindness like a mask. For years, I believed he was my protector. I didn't see the way he tightened the ropes around me with fake smiles and forged trust. I mistook his greed for guidance, his control for care. They told me I didn't need to handle business matters so soon after the tragedy. Rest, recover, you're still young, they said. And I believed them. I signed papers without reading them, legalese blurred by grief. I nodded through meetings without understanding their weight. I was just a girl trying to survive, and they were men pretending to help me do just that. But the truth? They weren't sheltering me. They were stripping me of power, of voice, of my parents' legacy. It wasn't just Edward, it was Blake too, my own husband. He stood beside me with vows still fresh, yet he already had his foot in the ladder, climbing a throne that should have been mine. One morning, I walked into the office and my keycard didn't work. Security looked confused. "You've been reassigned," they said. I wasn't demoted. I was dismissed, from my own bloodline, my own birthright. When I asked Blake what was going on, He smiled like everything was fine and said, "You're free now, Tracy. Let us handle things. You don't need to worry anymore." Free? I wasn't free. I was imprisoned in a gilded cage of lies and betrayal. I was married into a conspiracy, a pawn in their game, a name they needed to take control, and now that they had it, I was disposable. I began to notice the truth in whispers and silence, the way Blake avoided direct answers, the way my uncle spoke for me, never to me. I had unknowingly handed them the kingdom my parents built with every heartbeat, and when I confronted them, they didn't deny it, they didn't apologize, they smiled. "You were never meant to run a company, Tracy," Edward said. "You're emotional, you're naive. This world isn't for girls who cry over memories." Blake just stood behind him, silent, cowardly. The boy I once loved was gone, or maybe he was never there at all. That night, I locked myself in the office that still had my father's initials carved into the desk drawer. I cried for the girl who trusted too easily. I screamed for the daughter who never saw this betrayal coming. But beneath the sorrow, something else awakened. Not rage, not vengeance, something colder, sharper, more dangerous. Clarity. They took everything from me, but they made one fatal mistake. They left me breathing. And now, I'll use my pain to burn down everything they built on my back. This is no longer a story of grief. It's the beginning of karma. The rise of a woman they tried to silence, and the spark of my ultimate revenge. They thought I was broken, a discarded wife, a helpless orphan, a naive girl who'd lost everything, her parents, her name, her power. But what they didn't realize was that pain, when embraced, doesn't destroy you, it builds you. It molds steel from shattered glass. And in that silence they mistook for surrender, I was sharpening my spirit like a blade. After Blake and Uncle Edward stripped me of my birthright and tossed me aside like yesterday's news, I stopped talking to people, but I started listening, watching, remembering every paper I once signed, every whisper I'd ignored, every cold smirk passed between my uncle and the man I once believed would protect me, now played like a broken record in my head. Over and over, until the anger became focus. At night, I couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because my rage had found direction. I sat in my empty room, staring at the portraits of my parents, remembering their laughter, their faith in me. "Tracy, never trust words when actions whisper otherwise," my father once said. And oh, how deaf I had been, but not anymore. One evening, when the storm inside me refused to be caged, I reached out to the only person who ever truly stood beside my father. "Mr. Franklin," his voice cracked when he heard mine. "Your father's legacy lives in you, child," he told me. "But beware, the people feeding you were the ones plotting your starvation." And just like that, I knew I needed more than grief. I needed a strategy. Mr. Franklin introduced me to Maya Chen, a discreet, razor-sharp lawyer with a mind like fire and nerves of ice. She'd built her career in the shadows, defending women who'd been betrayed by the very hands they once held. When I told her my story, she didn't flinch. She simply said, "Let's start digging," and so we did. Every paper, every account, every backdoor deal they thought I'd never uncover, we found it. Offshore transfers, fraudulent documents, even secret meetings between Blake and Edward before our wedding. Maya looked me in the eye and said, "This wasn't betrayal, Tracy. This was a heist planned in slow motion." I remember sitting with that truth, my heart shattered, but my spine straight. They didn't just steal my company. They stole my trust, my love, my entire life. But what they failed to realize is that I was no longer the grieving daughter or the obedient wife. I was a woman born from ashes, and I was coming for everything that was mine. Publicly, I stayed quiet. Let them celebrate. Let them believe they'd won. But behind closed doors, I was collecting weapons. Truth, evidence, and allies. I planted my seeds of revenge in silence and watered them with fire. Because in the world of betrayal, the loudest revenge is silence. And karma doesn't knock. She kicks the damn door down. The Ghost of Truth. Told in Betrayal, first-person narration from Tracy's perspective. Crafted with rich, emotionally resonant language, fresh word choices, and all your channel's core themes. Emotional, heartfelt, betrayal, karma, family drama, and ultimate revenge. When you begin to pull back the curtain of lies, you must be ready for what you find, because the truth doesn't whisper. It howls. It was during one of our deep dives through the financials that Maya paused, her eyes locked on the screen, brows drawn like storm clouds. "You're not going to like this," she warned, her voice barely above a murmur. She was right. Behind every forged signature, every falsified transfer, was a familiar name. Blake Harrington. Months before, we were even married. Documents that should have needed my approval, signed with my name in shaky strokes, authorized by a man I was still calling my partner. My heart sank as the pattern emerged. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was premeditated destruction. But that wasn't the worst of it. Maya's next discovery came wrapped in encrypted files. She decrypted them with ease. What we found made my blood run cold. Blake had been feeding confidential company data to a silent competitor. One owned by a former rival of my father. Not only had he stolen from me, but he'd sold out the very business my parents had built from sweat and soul. Every late-night business dinner, every last-minute conference he rushed off to. Now I saw them clearly. He wasn't building our future. He was burying my legacy. I felt sick. I curled into myself that night, knees pulled to my chest, rocking with the weight of truth. This wasn't just about money. This was betrayal in its most intimate form. He had looked into my eyes, kissed my forehead, and lied through his teeth every single day. I walked to my father's old study, untouched since his passing. The air smelled of cedar and memories. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk, one I'd always been forbidden to touch. Inside was a dusty, leather-bound journal with only one page bookmarked. "If they ever come for what's yours, don't scream, smile, let them take it, then take it all back with interest." That night, I stopped mourning. I started plotting. Through Maya's connections, we contacted Carsalcross, 2 former board members. People Blake had pushed out under the guise of modernization. Once allies of my parents, they still held pieces of the original trust that governed ownership. And they were angry, furious in fact, not just at the lies, but at how easily my family's legacy had been handed to a fraud. We drafted the first motion to freeze the company's internal accounts. Quietly, legally, no warning. At the same time, I reached out to Passett. Delilah Monroe, an investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. I handed her a file titled The Harrington Heist. Every document, every secret, every hidden betrayal. She read in silence, then whispered, This will break him." And that was the point. I no longer wanted Blake to suffer in silence. I wanted him seen for who he truly was. I wanted the world to watch the empire he built on my blood crumble beneath him. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud. It's strategic. It's precise. It's built brick by brick with the same care they used to break you. But when it lands, it lands like thunder. I wasn't just coming back. I was coming back stronger, smarter, and backed by truth sharp enough to burn through steel. The Fall of Blake Harrington. A chapter laced with karma, betrayal, emotional power, heartbreak, and ultimate revenge. This is the moment where Tracy rises not with noise, but with precision, and brings Blake to his knees in front of the very world he tried to deceive. There's something poetic about silence before a storm, that eerie, charged stillness before lightning strikes. I sat in the boardroom, not at the table, but just outside the glass walls, watching, waiting. My name wasn't on the agenda, but my revenge was. Blake sat confidently at the head seat, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his gold cufflinks catching the light. His smirk made my stomach turn. The same smug smile he wore the day he signed the papers to fire me or hurt. From my own company, but what he didn't know was that this meeting wasn't his victory lap. It was his funeral. One of the board members cleared his throat. Before we proceed, we've received new documentation regarding ownership and fiduciary conduct. Tracy? The door opened. I walked in slowly, calm, powerful. My heels clicked like thunder on polished floors. Blake's face turned from cocky to pale within seconds. I dropped the file on the table. These, I said clearly, are the forged contracts, altered bank records, and backdoor dealings you orchestrated, Blake. You didn't just betray a marriage. You betrayed a legacy, he stuttered. Tracy, let's talk in private. No, I cut him off. You didn't steal in private. You don't get to squirm in private either. The board members passed around the evidence. Gasps, disgust, whispers. Then came the final blow. Delilah Monroe's exposé. Timed perfectly to go live during the meeting. Phones lit up around the room as the headline flashed. Husband, thief, liar, the truth behind the Harrington empire. In 10 minutes, everything Blake built on lies began to collapse. Clients pulled out. Investors began emergency calls. Emails flooded with questions, panic, and outrage. A man who once controlled the room now sat sweating, trembling, exposed. The chairman stood. Effective immediately, Blake Harrington is suspended from all executive roles pending legal investigation. And Tracy, he turned to me. As per trust guidelines and founding legacy, your position as chairwoman is reinstated. I didn't smile, because this wasn't joy, this was justice. But I wasn't done. Uncle Samuel Freysigfa, who once paraded as my protector, the same man who eagerly supported Blake's coup, received a subpoena 2 days later. Financial fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy. Turns out, forging a trust for personal gain isn't just unethical. It's criminal. His assets were frozen, his social circle vanished, and the respect he basked in for years, gone, wiped clean like chalk on a stormy sidewalk. As for Blake, he tried to reach me, a voicemail laced with regret, desperation, and fake apologies. I made mistakes, he said, but we were good ones. Yes, we were. But that version of us died the day he chose power over love. You taught me pain, I whispered to the void. Now watch what I do with it. Have you ever stood in the ruins of a life you once called perfect, and felt a strange peace in the silence? That was me, staring at the empty office Blake once stole from me. But it didn't feel like a tomb anymore. It felt like fertile ground, like something new was ready to rise, because now, I was no longer his wife. I was my own revolution. The walls still carried echoes of betrayal. The scent of war lingered. But I was not that broken girl anymore. I was Tracy Harrington. And I had turned my pain into power. Reclaiming the company was just the beginning. I called a staff meeting, not to bark orders, but to rewrite the culture Blake poisoned. I stood before the people who once watched me get pushed aside. I could feel the tension, the guilt, the quiet hope. I know what it's like to be betrayed, I began. To be silenced in your own home. To be underestimated in your own boardroom. But I'm here to tell you that ends today. Applause. Real, raw, thunderous. The dead silence Blake left behind? I replaced it with purpose. I launched new projects. Real community outreach. Female-led startups. and internship programs for underprivileged youth. My first hire, a young woman who reminded me of myself at 21. Wide-eyed, soft-voiced, brilliant, and unheard. I gave her the title Blake once robbed me of. Because my revenge wasn't just destroying Blake. It was rebuilding a world he could never thrive in. Meanwhile, Uncle Samuel and Blake weren't just disgraced. They were cornered. Fraud charges proceeded. Properties liquidated, reputation obliterated. They became cautionary tales in the business world. Headlines that whispered warnings. Don't bite the hand that built the empire. Sometimes karma doesn't knock. Sometimes she kicks the damn door down. One day, I walked past Blake outside a courthouse. He looked faded, not just in status, but in soul. A man deflated by the weight of his own lies. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman I'd become. And that's the beauty of survival, isn't it? They tried to bury me, not knowing I was a seed. Perfect. Let's bring this powerful journey to a close. They say time heals all wounds, but I disagree. Time doesn't heal you. Truth does. Justice does. Revenge, the kind that restores your dignity, that heals. I didn't just want revenge on Blake or Uncle Samuel. I wanted the world to know they tried to erase me from my own legacy and failed. The final court ruling came in on a stormy Thursday morning. Poetic, really. The same skies that wept over my parents' funeral now thundered with justice. Blake and Uncle Samuel were found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and manipulation of a trust meant to secure my future. Every asset they tried to siphon returned to the rightful owner. Me. And just like that, my family name was restored. But I'd never carry it the same way again. Now, I carried it with armor. Now, I knew the weight of betrayal and the fire it ignites inside the betrayed. I hosted a press conference in the very building they tried to steal from me. Wearing the same pendant my mother gave me when I was 15, I stood tall, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. As cameras flashed and reporters leaned in. My name is Tracy, I said, steady and sure. And this business was built on my parents' dreams, not on greed. I was betrayed by blood and bond. But from that betrayal, I built a fortress. We renamed the company after my mother. Not for branding, but for legacy. Because my story wasn't just revenge, it was resurrection. And Blake? I heard he moved to a small town, changed his name, and now lives in obscurity. The man who once craved power lost everything the moment he lost me. That's the thing about betrayal. It often leaves the traitor emptier than the betrayed. To those watching this, maybe you've been used. Maybe you've been betrayed by someone you trusted with your soul. Maybe you've cried silent tears behind smiles and boardroom doors. They used my love to build their throne. I used their betrayal to burn it down. So if you're standing in the ashes, pick them up. Rebuild, reignite, rise. Venge, now it's your turn. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your life? Share your story in the comments. You're not alone. This is a space for survivors, for warriors, for truth tellers.